Welcome to Behind the Story, where we discover the story behind your favourite stories. My name is Lisa Renee from the Collab Press, and I'm also a contemporary romance author.
And I'm Naomi Craig, author of the soon-to-be-out biblical fiction, Ezekiel's Song. Today, we had a great pre-recorded interview with Narelle Atkins. But before we get into that, what are you working on right now, Lisa?
Well, I've been having a blast with Tabitha Bolden. We are co-writing a rom-com, an amnesia rom-com. So anyway, so it's really cool. Like we plotted it out a bit as much as we could, which was a bit of a challenge to do the whole thing all at once. Like I think we spent a couple of hours and we only got like three quarters. I mean, so a third into it, plotting. So we're still adding some bits, but yeah. So basically, I write during the day in Australia, and then put some notes and things like that, and message her at night just before I go to bed. And then in the morning I wake up, and then she's got a chapter there, and she's sort of edited mine, and then we read each other's, and then we follow the story. So we got some plot points, but it does work better if we're waiting for that person to write their scene and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's cool. Like we'll say, oh, let's do this to her, and like this embarrassing thing, and then the next morning I wake up and then she's done it. So she's the female point of view, and I'm the Australian guy. So, but it's just been a crack up, and we're really enjoying working together. She said, because we're past the 10,000 mark of words, and she goes, usually at 10,000, I'm like, oh, I hate this story, I want to redo it. But she's been enjoying it, and so yeah, I can see us in the future doing a bit of this. And it's because, you get this book done in 2 weeks, like, because it's half the work, but also, yeah, it's like a whole chapter or like 2 chapters done in a day because of the day and night sort of thing. So it's pretty cool.
That's neat.
Yeah, so that's been fun. And she's doing good. We're both writing first person present. So yeah, we're getting along, doing that fine. So yeah. So what about you, Naomi? What have you been working on at the moment?
I'm working steadily for my book 3. It's about Shira in 1 Chronicles 7. She's credited with building 3 cities. So I'm actually in a pretty good groove. So I'm really thankful the Lord's just really helping me with that. It's going to be pretty messy right now, but if I can get it down, then it'll be a lot easier to edit after it's all down. That's for sure. So
how long do you keep? How often and how long do you work on it? Do you like every day? Do you do a little bit? Like how long does this take you?
So I set apart the mornings. If I can get going earlier, then I'll try around 8:30 or 8, and then work until 12. And then I've got to do family lunch, and then I try to work on marketing and stuff in the afternoon. So I usually write about 3 hours, but hopefully, and it's just hit or miss sometimes. If I'm distracted, then I feel like a horrible person because I haven't met my goal, but
but you're not horrible. We know that.
I know it's my own standard. And it's also, if I get myself distracted, if I'm just plugging away and actually typing, then it seems like my brain shows up a lot better. So just trying to train myself, getting good habits here. So
yeah, sounds good. Awesome. Well, we've got some interesting tips from Narelle, and she's been in the industry for a long time. She's interacting with lots of authors, and she runs a podcast with some others and a blog. So we're going to learn a lot from Narelle and some inspiration, and it's exciting to see what she's doing with her releases this year. So let's bring her on. Our guest today, Narelle Atkins, is a fun-loving Aussie girl at heart. Narelle is a lifelong romance reader. She found the perfect genre to write when she discovered inspirational romance. Narelle's contemporary stories of faith and romance are set in Australia and international locations. Narelle, thanks for joining us on Behind the Story.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here today.
So Narelle, for those who aren't familiar with you, tell us a little bit about you and what you write.
Well, I live in Canberra, Australia, a long way away from probably where many of your listeners are. and I write contemporary Christian romance, and I published my first book back in 2014. It was actually this year in September, October, will be 10 years since I actually sold my first book to a traditional publisher.
So we're featuring your book, Her Tycoon Hero. Sarah says,
Yes.
Narelle Atkins achieves a page-turning romance with high stakes and emotional depth. Her Tycoon Hero is a brave and rewarding story that breaks the pattern of playing it safe in Christian romance. Ooh, okay. So tell us what part sparked the story, Narelle.
Well, this is the first story that I ever wrote. And interestingly, it started its life as a clean, sweet romance, because I didn't even know that contemporary Christian romance existed when I first started writing this book last century. So it was a while ago, and I was in my 20s, so I wasn't that much older than Cassie when I first started writing it. But it's probably hard now for me to look back, because I've made so many changes and done so many different things with this book. But I was really interested in exploring Cassie, who had been an alcoholic and a party girl before she'd come to faith. And she's a recovering alcoholic that cannot drink at all, or she'll be in a lot of trouble and heading back to rehab. And it was really exploring how someone from that background can move into the Christian church world, and how other people treat her, and how the changes in her life and the way her family treats her all come into play as well, because her grandmother was also an alcoholic who would go to church every week, and her father has real issues with believing that Cassie really has changed and that he really can trust her. So there's a lot of sort of family dynamics that are going on in the story as well.
It sounds fantastic. So you had mentioned that there's been quite a journey when we were contacting by email. You said there's quite a journey to get Her Tycoon Hero to where it is today. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yes, well, I think your first book is always the book that you learn to write with. And a lot of people will put that book in their bottom drawer and never look at it again. Whereas I'm a persistent person and was determined that my first book was going to reach publishable standards. So I would have started writing it before I had children. And then when my children were young, I didn't really write. I don't know how young mothers with small children manage to write as well. I applaud them, because that was beyond me when I was at that stage in life. And so it was really probably the mid-2000s that I went back and started writing again. And I entered it in some unpublished romance writing contests and finaled in 2007. I went in 2008 to a Romance Writers of America conference in San Francisco, because I'd had a full manuscript request from a Love Inspired editor from a contest with that manuscript. And then eventually, as I said, I kept swinging between, will I write a sweet romance? Will I write Christian? Because everyone kept telling me you cannot publish Australian characters and settings with Love Inspired or any of the category romance lines that are Christian in the States. So at this time, 10 years ago, I had a form rejection from Mills and Boon in London, and I was beside myself with this story. And that I had rewritten it as a sweet romance at that point in time. And then Harlequin ended up buying the Heart Song Presents line from Barber and reinstating it. And so they were looking for a whole lot of manuscripts to start a brand new line. And I happened to have this book sitting there, and I converted it back to being a Christian romance and submitted it. And the editor who was acquiring really liked it. And then they offered me a contract in the September 2013. And then my editor said, well, have you written anything else? And I said, well, actually, I have another book that's set in the snowy mountains in Australia. I've got a second book to Her Tycoon Hero. It was called a different name back then, that I've written. And I've got ideas to have those as 2-3 book series. And she said, well, do you think you could write a synopsis in 3 chapters and get them to me really quick to see, so I can have a look at them? So of course I was writing, I think within 3 weeks, I was writing a synopsis in 3 chapters for 3 completely new books, submitted that, and then I was offered a 6-book contract in February 2013. And my first book that released was Falling for the Farmer, which is out of print at the moment. I'm going to get it back in print next year. And that released in February 2014. And I had a book out every 3 months until May 2015.
Wow.
So that it was very busy.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's amazing. What a great story there. So I just wanted to go back to Cassie. I really feel like that is definitely a new trend with Christian fiction is we're getting into the point where we can be gritty and we can see, like, take off our church face, and we can walk with people through struggles. I really think that that is a really good trend. Do you find that anybody like gave you feedback, like how can you have Christians having these struggles, or have you had anything like that?
Oh yes. I mean, you're always going to have people that don't like what you write. And
Mhm.
the key is to find your tribe of people who are in your target audience. I was told that that was an issue that people don't want to read about. So I did a survey I blog at the Romance blog, which is focused on contemporary Christian romance. And I did a post this year in February asking people about alcoholism in contemporary Christian romance. Do they want to read it? Do they not want to read it? And one of the things that came out of that survey is probably half the people who answered said, look, I don't want to see alcohol in a book. I don't really want to know about it. And the majority of people said, well, if there's alcohol in a book, it needs to be presented as being negative with bad consequences. I don't want to see drinking or alcoholism glorified in contemporary Christian romance. So people have very strong opinions and a range of opinions. Some people said, well, what does it matter if people are drinking in a Christian romance? Like, who cares? Like, that's just part of normal life. Why is that a problem? So there's a real spectrum of people that have very strong opinions on this topic.
Yeah, I can tell. But yet again, like, I mean, I grew up and I really haven't had a whole lot of experience with alcoholism or anything. So I think for me, it helps to bring the compassion, and you can walk with somebody better. I feel that's what I love about fiction, specifically Christian fiction, is it will either show me how I can interact with somebody if they're going through a hard time, or the Lord will use it as a mirror to my life. I'm like, oh, do you realize that you're doing this right here, right now? And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, Lord.
Yeah. I mean, and that's so true. And there's so many issues that we obviously can't be experienced with everything that happens in life. So I would, in Australia, describe myself of having grown up in an alcohol saturated culture. And alcohol has been available everywhere. It was normal for people in the church to drink alcohol, in the denomination that I attend. And some people can drink and have a glass of wine or a beer or whatever, and it's just like drinking a cup of tea or coffee or a soft drink or a Coke or a soda. And
Right.
for other people, one sip of alcohol is
Yeah.
a big, big problem. And I
Right.
have alcoholic family members. I've had family members who've passed too young from alcohol related issues. I have a very problematic relationship with a family member who is an addict, and alcoholism is one of their issues. So for me, it's very personal. And in this particular story, Ryan, the hero, is the character that I relate to, because he also has a brother that was partying with Cassie as well. So it gets all very complicated in terms of how their relationship pans out with the addictions in the past and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, that's great. So, first story is usually something that's really close to your heart, and it's something you've experienced or experienced through someone else and stuff. So yeah, that's awesome. So if we'll get to know you a little bit more, if you could describe yourself in 3 words, what would they be?
And that's so hard to pick 3 words. And I was talking to my husband about that. And I was like, how do I pick 3 words? So probably the first word I'd pick is curious. I've always am interested in knowing the what's and the whys and the hows. I'm not a sheep. If you tell me something, I won't necessarily take what you say at face value as being absolute truth. I want to actually dig in and investigate and see what's going on and what's the real story and what the different perspectives are on different issues and things like that. So my curiosity has no bounds really when it comes to things that I like, that I want to make a decision on and know about. So I really enjoy the research part of writing, precisely because I can indulge my curiosity about people and what makes them tick. The second word I would use is dedicated, and I think just the journey of getting my books published shows some dedication to writing. And the third word I would use is loyalty, because I am a very loyal person, and if you do the right thing by me and are good to me and treat me well, then I'll be very loyal to you.
I love that. So let's pause real quick for a midpoint question for our viewers, for our audience. What sort of gritty real life thing would you like to see in Christian fiction? Comment below. Let us know that. Tell us, do you like the gritty side, or do you want it to be like above, like a not shallow, because there's definitely a place for those that don't go gritty, but whatever you'd call that. how do you like your Christian fiction? Tell us that in the comments below.
And that's a great question, a really great question, because I wouldn't actually describe the story itself is not edgy, which might sound strange. So it has elements that probably push boundaries in terms of looking at issues, but in terms of what's actually on stage on the page, there's no alcohol consumed in the book at all. There's temptation to drink, but no one's actually drinking anything. And it doesn't really sort of go outside those reader expectation boundaries of what they expect to find in a contemporary Christian romance, which is clean, wholesome, and uplifting, etc.
Awesome. Good clause there to make sure it's safe to read, guys. It's the backstory. We were on the same page. Cool. All right. So what is something people will be surprised to learn about you?
This is such a hard question because I've been blogging for over a decade, and I've got a podcast that I also do with my friends Elizabeth Madry and Valerie Comer called Story Chats and Inspirational Romance. And we've been doing that for probably 18 months now. And we're probably in episode 80 something at the moment. So I do a lot of talking and blogging about me and bits of my life that have come out. So something that people don't know is probably in some ways a hard question. But I probably will say that I might be a bit less wise than the average person because I only ever had 3 wisdom teeth. The 4th one never showed up. So that's, never appeared. I had 3 awful impacted teeth that were horrible to get out, and I had to go to hospital to remove them. And then the 4th one wasn't there, which was nice. So I'll take that as a win.
There you have it. You learned it first on Behind the Story. I love it. So what is your favorite part of the writing process, and do you have a part that you dislike?
The favorite part is the beginning, when you have a brand new story, this blank canvas, and your imagination, you can just let it fly and the characters start talking to you. That's always so exciting. And you find out more about them and what's going on. And I will do my first draft is often a decent narrative outline of what's actually going to happen. And that will change as the story progresses because I'll learn different things that will redirect things. But that initial sort of buzz of starting a new story is probably my favorite thing.
And do you have a least favorite?
Oh, I think to be honest, the least favorite is having a looming deadline. And having had deadlines, I had a deadline every 3 months for 15 months when I was doing the Heart Song Presents books for Harlequin. So having to be nail-bitingly close to a deadline and pushing yourself to get a book finished, whether that's in the draft stage or the editing stage, is probably would be my worst part of the process. So I enjoy the entire process of writing a book. I just don't like the time pressure. So
that's fair enough. Some people love that and that drives them, but other people that's just, not enjoyable. But the good thing with self-publishing is you can sort of set your own pace, and depending on if you overcommit yourself or not, of course. So what is the best writing advice someone has shared with you?
Oh, absolutely. The hands down best advice is write the first book, finish the first book, write the next book. Don't get stuck tweaking and playing and editing and whatever the first book. Actually write the second one, because once you've written the second one, you can look back at the first one and work out why a whole lot of stuff isn't working, because you've learned from writing the second book. So my advice is to keep moving forward and not playing for 20 years with one manuscript. And I know people who have done that, and it's not productive. You need to learn to write. You need to actually be getting words on the page and actually writing.
Best money you've spent as a writer?
I would say joining writing organisations. So in the early days, that was Romance Writers of Australia, the Faith, Hope and Love chapter of Romance Writers of America, which is now Faith, Hope and Love Christian Writers, American Christian Fiction Writers, Amiga Writers in Australia. All those organisations have unpublished writing contests that you can enter. And that was what made the difference for me. It was getting that feedback from people I don't know who aren't biased, who would honestly say, what's wrong with a manuscript, what's working with a manuscript. And when you get enough opinions from contest judges, you can work out there's a whole lot of people saying the same thing, which for me was you don't have enough conflict. Internal conflict was my big issue. And so I spent a lot of time learning how to make sure that I wrote stories that have good internal conflict in them. Yes, so definitely look at the unpublished contest rather than forking out a lot of money for a manuscript appraisal too early. I think people will put down a lot of money on manuscript appraisals too early in their writing career. And if they don't have a really good editor that gives them the right information, then they can end up on a rabbit's trail for a while until they get back on track.
That's good advice. So you write contemporary Christian romance. So how does your faith impact, your stories and your writing process?
Well, I think this is one of the reasons that I write romance in the Christian setting rather than general market, because my characters have a Christian worldview and they behave in a Christian way. And I found it very hard to actually remove that from the characters and the way they think and the way they're motivated about things. And it's different. I think your religious beliefs, your worldview, your ethics, your values, they all come from somewhere. And I think the Christian part of stories will inherently come from the characters, what they're thinking, how they're behaving, how they're reacting to things, what their goals are. And when they're put under pressure, how they actually deal with things as well. And having that framework of the Bible and biblical principles also sort of defines a whole lot of stuff in a story. So I find it very hard to take the Christianness out of my characters and story. And that's why I write contemporary Christian romance, because it's a good fit for me in the way I think as well.
So how do you feel in this time that you've been, the 10 years that you've been publishing, how do you feel the market has changed for Christian fiction?
It's massive. Like it's 10 years ago, I don't know if I could have imagined what I'd be seeing now. And the real game changer was obviously the Kindle with ebooks and indie publishing. So if I go back 10, 15 years, if you publish yourself, that was considered to be effectively vanity publishing, and people assumed that what you'd be producing was just not good enough for a publisher to publish, therefore it was poor quality, therefore we don't buy it. And opening up the ebook market has just changed everything. And I'm so glad to see that indie publishing is being embraced, because really and I think probably in the last 5 years, I've really noticed how different traditional publishing is to indie publishing. So traditional publishing is very much focused on selling in a bookstore. So you want to have, if you're looking at traditional publishing, you're jumping around amongst a range of genres often many of the subgenres within romance, because you've got your place on the bookshelf under your last name and you want a whole lot of books to neatly fit on a bookshelf. And that's the way that people sell books in that market. Whereas indie publishing is totally different. If you're trying to sell on Amazon with the algorithms, you want to drill down your pen name or the name you're writing under to be as narrow as possible, so all your also boughts and everything will find the right people to read your book. So the mindset's very different. And I think if someone was to say to me that they do both, I would say, well, you're probably a traditional author who indie publishes, or an indie author who traditionally publishes, because I think you've got to have your feet in one camp or the other, because they're just so different in the way that you make decisions about your writing life and different things as well. And if you only want to write a couple of books, then traditional publishing, particularly small presses, are a really good option. If you're time poor or don't have the money to invest in indie publishing, they're a very good option. But if you're looking to have a career in publishing and write more than 20 books, then independent publishing is where you actually have the control to make decisions on what you want to write, how you want to write. You're not having to get past a gatekeeper with an agent or an editor who will say, I'd like this, but I don't like that. So it's just so different, but it's exciting because there's opportunities and everyone can work out where they fit in the market and what they want to do and make that decision. And I think it's a win-win all across the board.
So what comes next after her Tycoon hero?
Well, in terms of releases, I'm re-releasing my Sydney Sweetheart series. It was originally published by Heartsong Presents with Harlequin. So I have Winning Julia's Heart, which was previously titled Winning Over the Heiress. That's releasing June 24. And then Seaside Proposal, which I call my roundabout book, because nearly every book I've written, except for my Snowy Mountain series, is connected into this book somehow. I have that coming out soon after, Winning Julia's Heart. And then in terms of what I'm writing, I'm actually working on 3 projects at the moment. So I'm one of the authors that will be joining Chapel Cove and writing in the Chapel Cove romance world. So I have a half-written Chapel Cove book that I need to get finished. I'm also writing a book in a group with Lisa Renee, and that's going to be a series called Trinity Lakes Romances, and that's set in the US. And the next thing I'm doing is the first draft for that story, because my book will be the first one out in, thinking, end of February 2023. And I also have another author project I'm doing with Writing Friends. And this book will be coming out heading towards Easter 2023. And it's set in the Midwest. And my hero is going, at the moment, it could change, but at the moment he's a farm mechanic. And I have an Aussie girl who is the sister of my hero in Seaside Proposal, who will be going to the States. So that's also fun. And that's a setting I've never written in the Midwest before. So that's a brand new thing for me. So currently all my books have been Australian, or Solo 2, I had an Italian character in it because it was connected to a Tuscan legacy. But I will have some things coming out that are set in the States soon, which is very exciting.
Wow, you sure got a lot on. So that's very exciting. So we need to keep in contact with you. So what's the best way for our viewers and listeners to follow you?
Probably my website, narelleatkins.com, and I have a monthly newsletter, and that's where I will be share what I'm writing and different things. I usually have a paperback giveaway connected to my newsletter each month as well. So that's probably the best thing to do, is subscribe there, and you can do that via my website. I will soon have a free book connected to my newsletter. Once I get Seaside Proposal out, there's a novella that's book 3.5, Seaside Christmas. It's been around for a few years. It came out in a Christmas collection back in 2016. And that will be my free book. Probably, I think I've got it still in Kindle Unlimited until the 20th of July. But after the 20th of July, that will be what, if you know the terminology, reader magnet, that's what it will be. So that one will be available. And inspiromance.com is where I blog once a month with a lovely group of ladies that all write contemporary Christian romance, both indie and traditional. So if you're interested in CCR, as we call it, please head over to Inspiromance and check out our posts. And also in terms of podcasts and YouTube, Story Chats and Inspiromance with Elizabeth Madry and Valerie Comer is where I am every Friday morning US time, or Friday night Australian time. We have an episode drop for half an hour, and we chat about different books we've been reading. We do spotlights on different books and different things, and we've got a lovely pool of authors in the Inspiromance blog community that we draw on as our guests. So that's super fun as well, because I love talking about books that I've been reading and all that kind of thing.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much for sharing today with our viewers and our audience on Behind the Story.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm just so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And it's been wonderful to connect with your readers as well, and to talk about books, which is what we all love to read and love to write as well.
So remember to connect with Narelle. We'll have all those links in the comments below, but she's also giving away a copy of this new release, her Tycoon Hero, in ebook format for international and Australians. So all you need to do is comment on our midpoint question that we had below.
And if you're here from the historical or the biblical fiction community, comment below. Team BibFic represent. Let me know you're here. And if you are a reader of biblical fiction, I do have my free novella is called Ezekiel. Or that is not my free novella.
Don't give that away for free.
No, hold on. Let's try this. On Desolate Heights is about Balaam and his talking donkey, and that is free for my newsletter subscribers.
Awesome. And I've got a freebie as well if you're here for the rom-com or for contemporary romance. This is Fake Engagement Mistake. It's a fun Christian rom-com, and it's available on ebook or audiobook for free on my website. So we'll have the link below as well.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of Behind the Story. Until next time, let us run with endurance the race set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith.